Hail to the king, baby.
You know, I'm sick and tired of many in the gaming community making statements like how, sure, modern gaming on PC is great now, but back in the 90s, ports on PC were mediocre at best and downright terrible at worst. But really, this statement is mostly coming from people that don't seem to be aware of all the ports ever released for PC. As a result, when people talk about great PC games, they talk about games that started life on the PC, like Duke Nukem 3D, SimCity, Quake, Doom, Command & Conquer, and so on, but in reality, not only the PC did in fact get really good ports of both console and arcade games, but sometimes the ports surpassed even the original. And that's because the PC's biggest weakness, that of the hardware becoming obsolete in about 2 to 3 years as opposed to a console's 6 or 7, can actually also be its greatest strength. PC hardware didn't stagnate during the console generation, but was always evolving. What might have been difficult to port a Mega Drive game to the PC in 1988 was very doable for a different game from 1994, near the end of the Mega Drive's life cycle, because of just how many more times as powerful a typical consumer-friendly PC was by that point. And I think there isn't a better example of this than Street Fighter 2, because unlike other platforms that would usually get one port of a certain game, the PC would sometimes get 2 or even 3 different ports due to how rapidly improved the hardware was as time went by. And this was especially the case when it came to Street Fighter 2, where there would be multiple revisions of the arcade original. And sure enough, there are 3 versions released for DOS. 2 of them are pretty bad, but the third one?
Round 1, fight!
Published by GameTech, with the porting skill and care handled by Eurocom, this is not only the best port of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, but, dare I say it, is better than the arcade original. Let me explain. First, the presentation. Unlike the 16-bit console ports, the DOS port doesn't have rescaled graphics. It just uses the exact same sprites and backgrounds taken straight from the arcade original. The reason for this is that although this DOS port uses a smaller resolution of 320 by 200 as opposed to the arcade's 384 by 224, it's still large enough to not require the sprites and tiles to be shrunken and reduced in detail, whereas this is what they had to do to all 16-bit console ports, which ran at a measly 256 by 200 due to the game being too demanding for those systems that came from the 80s that had CPUs clocked at only 7 MHz, with the 1990 release of the Super Nintendo clocked at an underwhelming 3.6 MHz. But by the time Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo released in arcades, even before its port to DOS, PCs were now using 33 to 100 MHz 486 processors. So graphically speaking, nothing was scaled back. And one of the happy accidents of the DOS port, because of its slightly reduced resolution, the characters on the screen are larger, which by the way is a desirable feature for retro gaming enthusiasts. This also makes it easier for certain fighters like Chun-Li to perform a wall jump because of how much closer the edge of the screen is. The only limitation of the PC platform at the time was sticking to the standard VGA's 256 color limit. Again, less than the arcade, but still enough to not remove noticeable character and background details. Not nearly as bad as something like the Mega Drive's port that could only do 61 colors. And if you had one of the faster machines at the time, the game ran at a constant 70 frames per second. Yeah, 70 FPS was the standard for DOS games. Second, the sound. None of that crunchy Mega Drive, low sample PC engine, or horribly muffled Super Nintendo sound effects. Instead, these are the same samples from the arcade. But that's not the best part. Like with other PC ports of the day, they could have only adapted the music to work on the AdLib or Sound Blaster synth chip, or used higher quality samples that utilize the abilities of an expensive Gravis Ultrasound or Roland sound card. But no, they decided to also remaster all the tracks using CD quality audio, since this game would be released when CD-ROMs in PCs were common enough. And the thing I really appreciate about this remaster of the music tracks is that it's neither a rip of the arcade original nor a complete remix or reinterpretation of the original music like with the 3DO port. Which, by the way, I actually do like the 3DO port, but what I appreciate about this DOS version is that the tracks maintain their original style, this time with studio quality instruments. Third, the DOS port of Super Turbo is still better than the arcade and 32-bit console ports. Let's start with the PC's main competitors during the mid-90s, the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation. In theory, these games should cause the PC to make a run for its money, but not only the PC port still holds up to the 5th generation consoles, but there is one area that they suffer from that the PC doesn't: loading times.
Round 1, fight!
Unlike disc-based consoles from the 90s, most PC games didn't have to run from a CD, but many PC games, including this one, gave the user the ability to install the game to a hard drive that was many times faster than an optical drive. So much faster, in fact, you only see a loading notification for a second or two between matches. But how is this version of the game better than the arcade original? Well, the fourth and biggest reason why the DOS version of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is better is simply because of the difficulty. Up to this point, there were 4 official updates of Street Fighter 2 for the arcade, and it seems with each update, the opponent AI keeps getting harder and harder to the point where even a fighting game veteran such as myself just can't beat the single player mode, even when set to the easiest difficulty. I've managed to beat previous versions of Street Fighter 2, but Super Turbo was released during a major spike in the type of arcade games that would be later infamously known as quarter munchers. From King of Fighters' insane bosses, to Mortal Kombat 2's cheating AI, to Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo's instant damage attacks that is impossible for a human to counteract.
Electrocute. Quarter circle punch.
Oh my, yo! I can't jump on this either, bro. Come on, dog. What?
But I could only get past like 2 stages. I get past like 2 levels, and it became impossibly hard after that. And I was like, dude, what is going on? The game was way too hard. And even changing the difficulty from the highest stars to the lowest stars didn't matter. It was always ridiculously hard. It was so hard that it kind of tanked the profits of the game in the US.
This alone is why I consider the PC version to be better than the arcade, because when you choose easy, it's actually beatable. You don't have to exploit the AI's logic deficiencies to win. It's still crazy difficult on hard and quite challenging on normal, but at least now I can actually beat the game and finally get to see each character's ending cutscenes. So, is this the version to play? Well, other than a few minor annoyances, like you might have to make changes to your configurations for DOSBox or your PC emulator of choice. And even though there was a re-release of this DOS port on Good Old Games that had a custom version of DOSBox already set up for modern PCs, at the time of this recording it is no longer available to purchase, which means players will have to rely on other means of acquiring a copy. But I mean, that's not Eurocom's fault. If you really care, like Eurocom did while developing this port, it's a version of the game worth preserving, and is highly recommended for anyone that is either a Street Fighter 2 fan or just a casual fan of fighting games in general. So, in my opinion, yes, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo for the PC is the best version. Hail to the king.
Hail to the king, baby.